My name is Liz Brigham. I'm one of the members of the programming committee for Confluence, and by day, I'm the executive director of the J. Hurt Hub for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Davidson College. Really excited to be here with you all after 10 months of planning and conversations. This is my third year helping with Confluence, and it's great to see how it grows every year. So we are going to spend the next several minutes talking all about data in action. I'm going to let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves briefly, and then we're going to jump right into questions. Around 4 o'clock or so, we'll pause and take your questions. If you wouldn't mind, please do wait for a microphone to get to you so that everyone can hear your question and engage. Thanks so much. Go ahead, Emily.
Hi, my name is Emily White. I'm the CEO of Impact Data and Events. We have built a data model with Johns Hopkins that shows the top trending artists in any location with the most fans who are unregistered to vote and are non-voters. We also have tools for any artists who would like to know where they have the most unregistered fans to vote, so let me know if you're interested in that. And we take that data and produce free concerts that folks get into by checking their voter registration or submitting a selfie from outside their polling place. We also make that data and those strategies available for other nonprofits. Also the author of How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams, and hosts the #1 music business podcast globally of the same name.
Fantastic, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cicely Mitchell. I'm the owner of Missy Lane's Assembly Room, which is a jazz club in downtown Durham. I'm also the CEO of So When Do I Clap? It's an entertainment consulting firm that helps festivals do their festival production. Recently, I've done Biscuits and Banjos with Miss Rhiannon Giddens, as well as Missy Lane's Block Party, Art of Cool Festival, as well as Made in Durham with Little Brother.
And Naras.
Hi, I'm Naras, Eechambadi. I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Universal Music. Universal Music is, of course, based in Santa Monica, California, but I live here in Charlotte. I've been here for 30 years, so I'm pretty much a native. I actually built 2 data analytics companies here in Charlotte. I sold them, and I've only been in the music business about 4 or 5 years now, about 5 years now. And so not a music expert by any means, but definitely know my data and analytics. So looking forward to participating in the conversation today.
Great, and that's where we're going to start with you, Naras, please. So you oversee data strategy, global data strategy, for Universal Music Group. How's the role of data in shaping artist strategy and fan engagement evolved over the past few years, and what do you see as the next frontier?
Yeah, so actually one of the reasons UMG hired me and brought me on board was to go get better at connecting artists with their fans. Because historically, as a company, we've been very good at the artist relationships, but left the fans to the artists to figure out how to manage, and we figured actually we can help them a great deal. So what we've done is really build out a fan data ecosystem, if you will, where we are able to bring in data about fans from all the different touch points, whether it's social media, it's Discord servers, it's the websites, the merchandise stores, a whole bunch of, I can't even think of all the sources. I think we have something like 200 sources we can bring data in from about each fan, and then put it together so that we have a comprehensive view of the fan. We know who the super fans are, who are casual fans, what they're, to some extent, Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube don't necessarily share a lot of listening data with us, but we try to infer it from other sources so that we know what genres a fan likes, what kind of artists they like, and there's different ways to collect it, and we've become fairly creative about how we collect the data and also how we use it to enhance our artists' effort to monetize their fan base.
That's great. And we will get back to sort of the process of data collection in just a moment, but thank you for teeing that up for us and all the different channels. Cicely, can you tell us, because you bring such a unique perspective as a biostatistician and a cultural entrepreneur, tell us a story about how you decided where to build your jazz club and what kind of data and research you used.
Yes, so I failed to mention this in when I was introducing myself, but I'm a statistician by trade. Music kind of adopted me into the industry, and so I have my PhD in biostatistics. And so when I was thinking about doing a jazz club, I first wanted to learn as much information just about jazz and the type of people who would, in modern day times, would want to come to a jazz club. And it just so happens that the National Endowment for the Arts takes the 10-year census data and asks questions about what is called historic arts, whether it's jazz, whether it's going to a museum, the opera, chamber music, that sort of thing. And so I took the data set from, I don't know, it's probably 15, 20 years ago, and looked at the demographic data and some of the other kind of core items that are tied to people who would come out to see jazz before even making the decision of doing pop-ups in the Raleigh-Durham area. And it happens that most people who like to see jazz, at least from the data set, are highly educated, in a socioeconomic bracket, and being in the RTP area, we were, of course, or are a hotbed for the types of people who would be open to coming to a jazz club. Whether it's the club is like 5 miles away from Duke. So it's one of those things where, like, if you're close to a university, you're close to a research type of town, that they would be more likely to come. And so I studied the data before even trying to go out there to open up a venue like that.
I love this. Now we're building off of each other. Data collection, now sort of data harvesting and the insights and the analytics to ultimately monetize that data, which we'll get to that in a moment as well. But Emily, can you talk about more of that monetization? So how can you empower independent artists to collect the data, to harness the data, to look at the data, to build sustainable careers, and what that looks like?
Yeah, well, the first key to building a sustainable music career is creating great art, right? Let's not skip that step. I know that can take a very long time. But after that, the Cliff's Notes version of building a sustainable music career is collecting as much direct-to-fan contact information as possible in the form of mobile phone numbers and email addresses. And, for example, I managed an artist that, I'm dating myself by using sales, but that sold 20,000 copies of her debut solo album for a major label subsidiary. And that's considered a mass market failure. But she went on to raise over $1 million on Kickstarter with 20,000 fans because we had built a 100,000 person email list, right? So it's not necessarily how many fans you have, it's how you are monetizing them. And the other really important factor is to be monetizing your music before it's out. So if you have a clear vision for your release, like I'm making an album, an EP, a space opera, et cetera, you want to launch a pre-order, not a pre-save. I mean, you can do pre-saves, that's fine, but a pre-order as far in advance as possible, because that's going to be your highest profit margins when you're running pre-orders through your website and through Bandcamp, and then that's also where you're collecting that crucial fan contact information. If you pay attention to the biggest artists in the world, they are all launching long lead pre-orders, because that's where you're gonna make dollars, tens of dollars, hundreds of dollars, hopefully thousands of dollars, et cetera, and instead of just waiting until day one and posting a Spotify link, which you're basically saying, give me fractions of a penny, right? So you want to be, everyone in your life, you want to be asking for their email address, asking for their mobile phone number. That's why tech companies are the most valuable companies in the world, because Spotify, Apple, everyone else has all of your fans' contact information. So it's not why anyone I've ever met, became a musician, but you need to think of yourself as a tech company and collect as many mobile phone numbers and emails as possible. That's the most crucial piece of fan data for artists.
What really strikes me is as artists, we spend so much time thinking about audience engagement and curation through the music or through a live performance, but we fail sometimes to think about curation and engagement with fans once they leave the venue, or once they're just listening on their speaker at home or in their car or wherever they choose to be there. That audience engagement really never ends. So maybe if we could talk a little bit, let's go one level deeper now that we've set the table of all the different ways from collection to harvesting and collecting insights and monetizing. What are some of the best practices that you all have seen to collect data in an ethical way?
I would definitely say when we sell tickets or reservations, at least at Missy Lanes, we broke up with ticketing providers and we run reservations for tables through our POS system. But we have the email, we have the phone number, and then we just email and text them, if they've opted in through that system. And so everything now is right in one database. Our POS, our ticketing, our marketing, it's all there. And so that's been one practice from like purchase. Then we also, of course, have social media and our email. When people come onto the website, they can sign up for our email. When we do a lot of contests on our social platforms as well, capturing that kind of information, whether it's their email or their phone number, and then opting in.
Yeah, I think what Cicely said exactly. That you do all of that at point of contact, but then there are other ways to collect data outside of that. I think I want to go back to something Emily said, which is the pre-orders are very important, right? Both as a way of monetizing, but also identifying who your super fans really are, because those are the people that really are the super fans, the people that are buying in advance. And then that can actually seed your outreach efforts. Once you know the profile of your super fans, there are ways to figure out who else out there might be like them, and you can go there. But to come back to the question, Liz, that you were asking about ethical use and ethical collection, is that you just need to be very transparent. And what are you going to use this for? Why are you asking for a phone number? Why are you asking for an email? You don't want to spam them after the fact. And also, you don't want to be sharing that data with third parties unless you have express permission. Sometimes you can get that, and sometimes people will say no. And of course, in the US, we have slightly more lax laws around this compared to Europe is a lot stricter. It's a lot of double opt-ins. It's not a single opt-in. So it's a little more challenging in other countries. But the US, at least from a data collection standpoint, it's a little easier. But then the collection, and there are so many, Cicely talked about the websites, the POS systems, but also, I think Liz was telling me there are some games in the back of the room. We do a lot of video games that we will actually create along, with a model release, with the album release, and actually use the games to sort of engage the fans so that they can give us more information about their interests and things. So figure out ways, creative ways, that are complementary to the music, that allow you to go out and earn the right to get the data and to communicate with your fans. And once you have the data, use it to engage appropriately with them. You're sharing something, giving something of value. Those are ethical uses in my mind.
Just ask. What we're talking about with direct-to-fan communications, the larger term for that is permission marketing. That was coined by the brilliant Seth Godin over 20 years ago, and I really recommend subscribing to his blog. It's incredible. So yeah, just ask your fans. That permission is everything. They are your most important fans because they are giving you permission to have their data, and then care for that, right? Like send personal, for artists, like send personal messages, in your email list, like as yourself, right? Like letting them know what's going on. And then also incentivize people to sign up for your text list and email list. Like if you're comfortable, say, hey, anyone that signs up for the text list or email list is gonna get a demo in advance, or, exclusive messages from me, or even just like a exclusive photo, right? So really make that, your baby, your lifeline, because social media platforms come and go, right? We're at the behest of petulant billionaires. Many artists built their careers on MySpace, and things like Vine have gone away. So I know it sounds wild that like Instagram might go away someday, right? But these algorithms change every day, right? So you own your text list, you own your email list. Just be asking everyone you know, everyone that you run into, absolutely everyone at shows. And it's a great icebreaker at the merch table too, whether it's you or someone doing merch for you, when someone is mulling around like, hey, would you like to sign up for the text list or the email list? And then you could also, set something up like, free button, if you sign up for the text list or email list at shows. So really like make that your baby and get really creative with it.
Just to jump in there, I think those are great ideas, and just building off of that, sometimes an incentive is just being able to come behind the scenes, right? Just sharing the process of making your art. So sometimes incentivizing may not be like an actual physical thing, but it may just be letting people in behind the scenes so that they can see how you make your art.
I'm really curious. These are all amazing ideas. I'm curious how you're taking that data or the insights from your data, whether it's at a grand scale or maybe it's at a smaller scale, just in one club or one festival, and changing your programming in some way or changing your offer. So what's that fine line between still being creative and owning your intellectual property and being true and authentic to who you are as an artist, but also recognizing that your fans are giving you feedback through that data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, and maybe you shift in some way. So I'm just curious if you all could share a bit about that.
Well, the original programming schedule and programming calendar for Missy Lanes from day one is a lot different than what it is today. I had in my mind that, Wednesday was going to be, this thing, whether it's open mic, and then Thursday was going to be a jam session. And over time, people start to tell you what they do and don't like. Mm-hmm. The thing that has stood the test of time has been the jam session on Thursday nights. People love that. It has a lot to do with community because, Central can come and play. It's North Carolina Central is one of the schools that's literally around the corner from Missy Lanes, and they have a jazz studies program. And so that's the night that we invite all of the Central students and faculty to come play. That one has stood the test of time. Open mic started out strong and then, fizzled out. So as we watch attendance, as we watch even some of the things that were popular like dance nights, a lot of people come, but they're not drinking, right? So then we decided, okay, we're still gonna do dance nights, but we're not gonna do them every week. We'll just make it a special thing and do it once a month. So we've used our POS data, attendance data, sales data in order to drive some of our programming just based off of that.
Yeah, and so we actually use email sometimes as an interactive tool. Like we will embed questions in the email that are interactive in the sense that it's sort of almost like a gamification of the email itself. You respond, and based on that, you get another thing. And we are able to get feedback from fans sometimes on what they like, what they don't like. Sometimes it has to do with the music. Sometimes it has to do with the merch. And would you like to, what kind of things would you like? And one of the things that is very popular for some artists is signed things. If you, I think you mentioned that something that's personalized, something that's a piece of the artist. If you are able to share that, that can go a long way to building that engagement.
And by the way, it can be a signed, lyric sheet, right? Which costs as much as a piece of paper and a pen and a stamp, yes. Right? It doesn't always have to be some elaborate thing. But I know that, the word data gets thrown around a lot in all industries, certainly in our industries. In our industry, I know that can be intimidating to artists and music industry professionals. So in addition to direct-to-fan contact information, the other way this can be really helpful is knowing fan locations, right? So I'm a big fan of Chartmetric, particularly for knowing where your fans are. You can also look at your location metrics absolutely on streaming, on your email list, on your text list, on your social media. But instead of just booking shows and hoping that people show up, pay attention to where your fans are. And as you're building up your local draw, say here in Raleigh, that hard ticket draw, you headlining, not opening for anyone, not a free show, that's your currency. And then you can go on Chartmetric and check out the top trending local artists in Raleigh, in Asheville, and you can reach out to artists that you like or that are like-minded genres and say, hey, I'm good for 100 tickets in Charlotte. Would you like to set up a gig swap? And you can come open for me here, I'll come open for you in Asheville, right? And as you start to expand nationally, again, you can pay attention to where you actually have fans, which is gonna be incredibly appealing, to venues instead of just like, here's my music, right? They care about how many bodies are gonna be in the room. And then you can also apply that internationally. Like I was working with Imogen Heap and I was tour managing her like a long time ago. And her manager noticed that Jakarta was the #1 country on Facebook Insights, and that's obviously not a country, right? And so the city of Jakarta was outperforming entire countries. So the manager went to the agent and said, hey, can you see what's going on in Indonesia? And the agent said, oh, there's no music industry there, don't even bother. And he was like, can you just check? And she came back with a slew of lucrative offers, right? And I did the same thing. I was working with an artist that lived in Nashville, did really well in New York, London, but I could see that his numbers in Sao Paulo and Brazil were through the roof. I did the same thing. I asked the agent to poke around and all these lucrative offers came in, right? So pay attention to your location metrics as far as data goes to really drive, where you should be touring.
Thank you for teeing up the next question, which I appreciate. No, this is great, because what I heard you say is these types of data insights are a way to, one, mitigate risk, and two, go to where your people are, where and to your point, you can go armed in with data to these venues. Yes, go ahead, Naras.
No, I was just going to say, to Emily's point, this data is very accessible. It's very easy. You can get it. You don't have to work very hard to get it. So absolutely, it's a great point.
Yeah. No, wonderful. So let's talk a little bit more about tour strategy in that, because I had coffee with the Oceanic guys. I was like, Nathan was here somewhere about a month ago, and they were talking about how they're going to play a gig in Chicago because they were looking at their Instagram data and saw, all of the DMs and other kind of information from another band that they were, I think on Spotify, they were, in the so sounds like you kind of category. I'm sorry, I'm mislabeling that, but you all know what I'm talking about. Nonetheless, then they just reached out to that band cold and said, we know you're playing shows in Chicago. We'd love to come open for you because, we're in kind of the same genres, and now they're playing a huge show in Lincoln Park, which is great. So I'm curious to see, what have you seen, whether it's with the artists that you've managed or even from the club perspective too, Cicely, how can the artists in the room think about piggybacking off of other tours or using that data to be smarter about how they're booking shows?
Definitely from a venue perspective, of course, we're always looking for people who can bring their own audience, and then how, as a venue, we can amplify that. People who may not even know those artists but are looking for the experience that we provide. And so, of course, we ask them about shows that they've done in other places. And if we think that it's not going to be as strong, then we'll try to match them up with a local opener that we know could carry, 50 tickets or what have you, whatever number, in order to then introduce that touring band to their audience. So that's how we normally do it.
How's Universal Music Group doing that at scale, Naras, in thinking about tour strategy?
A lot of our tour strategy is essentially, we get a lot of data or pre-saves. That helps us understand where the clusters are of again, super fans, the people that are going to come. We use a lot of locational data to understand who's in the areas, who's in the past. And we look at a lot of history. One of the things that we do very well, I think, is we have a lot of good historical data. So we know exactly where, what happened when the artist performed in a city that, or a venue in the, a year ago, 2 years ago, and that historical data very often, or who bought merchandise the last time around. And when they buy merchandise, we usually have embedded QR codes that allow us to identify who they are so that we can connect the dots. And those kinds of things really help us target the super fans for the next thing and remind them that something is coming, a show is coming. And then we also work with companies like Bands in Town to identify who has affinity for a particular artist.
This location data is your currency, should you choose to use it. I mean, it starts with great art and the direct-to-fan strategies we were talking about, and building up your fan base, and dare I say, like, your cult. And I know it's so easy to get distracted in our FOMO society, right? Like, social media platforms were literally built for FOMO. But the more you focus on yourself, your art, your green grass, right? Not what's going on over there. And if you truly can't stand the FOMO, reach out to people. You can reach out to those artists and say, hey, can we get coffee? Can we get a Zoom, set up a Zoom? And that's what's so great about, a conference like this where the community really comes together. But if you pay attention, as you build up your career, especially locally, and you pay attention to those location metrics, it actually doesn't matter if you're getting press and played on the radio and things like that. Like, at our nonprofit, we've always booked talent per the data. We started with the raw data based on listenership on Chartmetric. Now we've analyzed it. But for example, I'm originally from Milwaukee, and I know the local music scene there pretty well. So when I initially looked on Chartmetric at the top trending local artists, the artists that I'd heard of that are like the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel's artist to watch at South by, or like a Radio Milwaukee darling, don't have fans. They're good networkers, they can afford publicists, etc. If you want to open for someone that has a lot of fans in Milwaukee, Latin hip hop group Quinto Soul freaking crushes in the data, right? And so that's like really powerful for Quinto Soul to be able to reach out to local festivals and other artists like, hey, we're the #1 local artists in Milwaukee, even though, I'm saying this, even though the local industry is completely overlooking them. So use that location data as power, right? As you build up your career, when you're reaching out about shows or really anything that you're, dare I say, pitching yourself for.
Okay, now we're gonna switch a little bit to AI because we haven't talked about it yet. So let's just give a broad sweeping overview of your perspectives on AI in this space and using the data. What's working, what's not, what do you feel like is helpful? We'll start there and then we can build off of that.
Okay. You want me to
go ahead, Naras. Mm-hmm.
So actually I want to go back to the previous panel.
Sure,
where there was some discussion about AI. And I just want to say that, the DSPs, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, they are trying very hard to weed out AI-only music because, frankly, it's not good for their business. They understand that it's not good for artists. And they have these are technology companies first. They are music companies second. And they are very good at detecting AI-generated music and weeding them out. But it's a war, right? And basically, the spammers get smarter. These companies get smarter, and they kind of it's just a build up all the time. But they keep taking them down. So that's number one. And also, a pure AI-generated music isn't eligible for royalties because it's not copyrightable. So that's just a point I wanted to make. So Spotify is not the enemy in that sense. So that's important to remember. The flip side on the AI is that some of the things that we've talked about may be intimidating for you, may sound intimidating because, collecting the data, putting it all together, figuring out what the fan is, who it is, where they are and stuff may sound tough, but frankly, with some of the agentic AI technology that's coming up right now, this stuff will get easier over time. You can get these bots to do the work for you. And some of these things are not that hard to program, even if you're not a technical person. That's a great thing about Gen AI, is some of the things that we've spent millions of dollars doing over the last few years are going to be much easier going forward because the technology is getting there and it's very usable, and you don't have to be very technical to use it. You just have to, kind of dip your toe and then jump in and do it and try it, and it'll work. So AI can be a friend, it can be an asset. there's no real need to be scared of it.
Yeah, I would definitely say there's two things about AI, good and bad. So from I guess, good perspective, you can use tools to be able to do tasks much quicker for you than you normally would. But then on our end, I'm in the business of expanding the audience for jazz. And jazz is about live improvised performance. And so the way we promote our experience, it is anti AI really, as far as AI musicians and AI music, because the experience that we put before people is live music in real life, improvised music. And so as far as like AI generated music or what have you, we're kind of, I guess like a old school, where we're actually in the business of having people be in place with live musicians improvising music. That's what we sell, that experience. But then on the other side of it, we do use AI to do some, task that would be menial tasks for us, and it helps us get our business done.
So there's obviously a lot of understandable outrage from artists and the artistic community about AI, and I personally feel that's rooted in historical trauma, right? Artists historically, dating back to the 1950s have often been taken advantage of by, the music industry, et cetera, right? So when you see people really, like, excuse my language, like losing their shit over this, like, that is why, right? But this stuff can also be nuanced, like we actually have been using AI for years if anyone's ever used mastering software. Or I was moderating a panel and, it was an underserved artist, but they don't have to be underserved to not afford this. They said, well, I really wanted to have an orchestra in my music, and I there was no way I ever could afford an orchestra, right? So I think it's just putting thought into how we are using these tools. At the same time, it's more important than ever to call your congressperson and let them know how important it is that, your name, image, and likeness is yours, right? And that you have control over who is using your music and how. And, as you're putting together band and group agreements, even if it's just a verbal conversation and then via email, although I know there is a automated contract platform here that I met at, yes, what's your company called again? Mesa? Okay, great. So a company like Mesa can help you out with agreements. But my point is, I know nobody likes to think about this, but God forbid, a band member passes away, right? Like, what are you doing about AI deepfakes of vocals, right? Or holograms and images and things like that. So it's really important to think about, your own rights and how you're protecting that. And I literally moderated a panel with someone from the Copyright Office, and he was like, please call your congresspeople. They want to hear from artists. They want to learn about what laws need to be passed. But ultimately, and again, it's got to be it is so frustrating when you see these articles like some, AI artist just signs a $3 million deal or whatever, right? Like, who isn't going to be dispirited by that? But that's why what we're talking about with regard to building authentic relationships with your fans is more important than ever, right? Like that personal touch, really building up your live show if you play live, and even those personal messages, via your text list and email list. Like all of that is so, so important, because I'd love to end what I'm saying on that, but we're getting into deep fake world, right? So that's why it's really important to establish those relationships with your fans now, because there are going to be kids in the not so distant future that are going to be a fan of something that they do think is a real person, communicating with them, and they aren't. So just just focus on your art and your fan base, and try not to get too bummed out about the noise.
All right, I have one more question, but for those of you in the audience that do have questions, get your hands ready. We'll have a mic, I think, running around at some point, but we'll get there in a minute. Just to build off of what you all have said, we've heard over 100,000 songs every single day are uploaded to streaming platforms. I have listened to, DJ X on Spotify and what that recommends to me, but I'm curious about artists and new music discovery relative to just the influx of music out there, whether it's AI produced or produced by a human. Is AI a good way to find new music? Is that another potential avenue, or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it can be, right? This sounds lame, but they have hundreds of millions of users. I love Pandora, right? Like, that's gonna suggest certain things or whatever. But I also think people are getting a little sick of that. Not Pandora, but just, AI recommendations in general. Most of us listen to countless different genres. So I would actually empower the artists here to really be uplifting each other and recommending each other, right, for more authentic, suggestions and really coming together as a community. And there was an article that a few friends sent me this week about the power of college music directors and college DJs too. And so there's clearly, on one hand, there's clearly a lot of people are craving that human authenticity of curation. That's really important. On the other, the argument is college stations don't always have a lot of listenership. I have a lot of thoughts on that. That's for another panel. If you are doing a college radio campaign, post that you're getting spins, tag the DJ, tag the station. Don't just let that radio report sit in an inbox. A lot of times those kids go on to become music supervisors and booking agents, or they're the influencer within their circle, right? But yeah, I really encourage you guys to uplift each other, because otherwise I think you can just be kind of in your own feedback loop. And as much as I love 90s Britpop, there's a lot of other things I love too.
Okay, great. We will take some questions from the audience for the next 10 minutes or so. Don't be shy. Yes, it's a hand at the back. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Rick.
This question is for Naras. You mentioned AI tools and email generation. Have you heard of any AI tools that help email generation? And if so, could you let us know what they are?
I'm sorry, AI tools for?
AI tools and email generation.
For email generation, wow, that's good. That's a good question. For well, it depends on, are you talking about writing emails, sending emails? I think for writing emails, there are a lot of, for writing in general, there are a lot of tools, I mean, including, Microsoft Copilot or whatever. So, but I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know of any specific tools that allow you to both formulate the emails and send them out. But any kind of research that should give you surface some things. And it also, the question is, what do you want to do with that? There's different levels of it. You can customize emails. You can create 100 different kinds of emails for different kinds of audiences, depending on who you're targeting, young, old, with genre, that kind of thing. So it's a question of how complex you want to take it. But I don't know don't have any specific recommendations, I'm sorry.
I want to bring this back, with all due respect, and I've taught college classes, to the educators in this room, because we really need to teach people how to write emails. My first book is called Interning 101. I did not set out to be an author. I realized that there were students showing up and we were teaching so many basics over and over, and I still run into this all the time. Students don't know how to write emails, and it's not their fault, right? Who are you guys emailing in school? Your professors, your parents, whatever, right? And then we show up, nobody knows what CC is, nobody knows what BCC is, there's missing subject lines. And the reason I'm encouraging this is I get so many AI pitches, and it's so obvious, and from adults more now lately, but the first time I really noticed it was from a student. And I wrote back and said, did you use AI to write? He had seen me speak in his class. And I said, did you use AI to write this? And he said, yeah, like he was proud of that. And I was like, can you please just talk to me like a human? So I would actually encourage you to practice, if you're getting stuck, sure, throw it in a chat GPT or whatever. But it's I know it'll get better, but it's really obvious, and it's really for me impersonal, and just practice being a human. It's going to be much more effective.
Yeah, I think the point here is that you don't want AI to use you, you want to use the AI. So it should be your words and your tone and your language, and AI can help you refine it, smooth the rough edges, and maybe customize it to a different audience if you want to do that. But this is true of all of this technology that's coming up. It's like you need to control it rather than let it control you. That's a very important thing.
Our nonprofit is actively hiring people that we are comfortable responding to artists and industry people. Anyone that is qualified to do that, let me know, because we don't want to take the time to train people. So the more you guys can practice and the more educators can start training. Like, I've retired from teaching college classes, but I've always wanted to, with permission, put my inbox up on the screen and obviously like teach them how to reply to stuff, but be like, this is your assignment. How would you reply to these emails? So please, please, please do that. It's gonna help the students so much when they're looking for jobs.
I see I have my homework after the panel, so I appreciate that. Okay, next question. Yes, in the back. Just wait 1 second, please, for the microphone. Thank you.
Hello, so I just graduated from Full Sail in Music Business, and I'm interested in going into being a strategist. So one thing that I struggle with is balancing my creative side with my analytical side and bringing that into fruition when I'm coming up with ideas for artists. Do you guys have any advice for when something is ready to be brought into the world, like when an idea is ready, and so that I can stop ruminating on my ideas and researching so much?
That's a good one. I would say just put it out there. I know that sounds not, like what you're probably looking for, like a formula or something like that. But I'm more an analytic person that has become a creative, and I am one that will analyze all over the place before it goes out there, and then next thing you know, someone else may have beat you to part of what your idea was. You're never gonna have it all figured out. Just if you have, most of it, I'd say, 80% of it worked out, I would definitely put it out there in the world and just know that this may just be the pilot of it, and then once it is out there in the world, people will tell you what parts of it needs to be fixed for, prime time. But you gotta just start. You gotta just put it out there for people to then give you the feedback to then fine tune your idea.
Listen to your intuition. To be an analyst, you're obviously very smart. You just graduated from Full Sail, you're well educated, right? But my intuition is always right. My brain is not always right. So, whether it's what you're working on or how many artists here have completely overthought, right? Like you're like 80, 90% done with a release and then overthinking. Go on a walk, develop a meditation practice, really tap into that intuition. But I think additionally, when you're talking about, analytics and things like that, my entire nonprofit is based on data and what's trending and creating these data models, right? But we also, it's okay to add your brain on top of that too, I talk to students about this all the time when they're figuring out what artists, they want to work with. So if there's 2 artists really going off in the data and you love one more, go with that, right? Or if that's, if that's what your intuition is saying, or that's what your spirit is really calling to. But just take breaks, take care of yourself. It's gonna help with the overthinking.
Naras, I was wondering if you could speak to this from your entrepreneurial experience.
Yeah, I think what you have to recognize with every problem is there is a structured part to it and there's an unstructured part to it. The structured part to it, where you have some data that can help you come up with a decision, you use analytics to do that. There's always in every problem, there is the intuition. There are other elements to, and I think the trick here is to recognize what is structured, where analysis is relevant and appropriate, and then where do you need to go with your heart. And and also with the creative process, and you guys know more about this than I do, but with the creative process, very often what happens is you reach a point of, maximum diminishing returns, if you will. And at some point in time, the more you work on it, the worse it becomes. So you need to kind of recognize that and stop at that right point. And sometimes the deadlines can be very helpful in forcing you to stop at the right time rather than kind of just keep going on, because the product often gets worse because you're overthinking it or overanalyzing it.
I'll just add really, really quick. I soft launched the expansion of our startup or of our nonprofit so much that it's the wrong name up there. Which is not their fault at all. Like, they are so organized and on top of things. We were talking over the summer, right? Like, we hadn't launched Impact Data and Events. I was calling it whatever's on that screen, like Impact Concerts or whatever. And then, we and our attorneys realized there was an Impact Concerts in upstate New York, right? But I was starting to, submit that as my title and our entity's name, knowing that we were going to be doing a big launch, which happened last week, right? So I love, the encouragement just to, start getting it out there. It's okay. It's okay to iterate. We all iterate and evolve as we go.
Test, learn, iterate. That's one of my mantras in entrepreneurship. Okay, we have time for one more question on the back, please.
Hi, my name is Chantel Armstead, and I'd like to thank all of you for being here today, just first of all. But how would you use data for planning a venture such as the startups that you guys have both all created when there's not a lot of data for the revolutionary idea that you are trying to present? And I'm going through this personally. If you want to hear more, I'm pitching tomorrow morning if you're interested. But
Remind us real quick about your startup again, for context.
Yes, my startup is about helping creators and entertainers build up in the entertainment industry without having to move to LA or New York, while also facilitating with smaller creatives such as fashion designers, photographers, etc., by building up in the community for the community while making things accessible for them to live without having to go to LA or New York.
That is so helpful. Thank you. I'll try to make it more broad in a second, but for you, I would really go on Chartmetric and find local artists, per that data, that actually have huge careers, because I actually think it's more like 200,000 songs are released today. So every artist is a cult, right? Like, you can look at your local arena, and we're all music experts, and there's gonna be tons of maybe not tons, but there's gonna be artists playing that you've never heard of, right? So I think to prove the incredibly important point of what you're doing, find those. There are countless examples out there. Like, I'm particularly obsessed with the example of Bon Iver, because like I said, I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he's from, this should be offensive, but it's not. We call everything north of Milwaukee up north, even though it's like a huge swath of beautiful land with amazing cities and universities, et cetera. Like, I'm totally dating myself, but I remember talking to, Justin Vernon, Bon Iver's manager at South by, I don't know, probably 15 years ago. And I knew you could rent a room in Milwaukee for like $500 a month. And his manager said, yeah, my mortgage in northern Wisconsin is $200 a month for a home, right? So we can build careers from anywhere now if you have access to the internet, right? You can record music, you can distribute music, you can market music. You don't need to be in these expensive cities. So for you, there's so much data out there. You just need to go and find those examples. And we just launched our first ever digital voter reg campaign at Impact Data and Events, targeting the artists in our Johns Hopkins data. And it's like, yeah, I care a lot about, we're focused on the New York City mayoral election as a pilot. And it's like, yeah, I care a lot about the, it's probably offensive to him to say goth, but the goth artists on Staten Island doing Adele covers with 500,000 TikTok users. Like, that's, there's just so much out there to prove your point. But I think for the broader question of like, how do you use data to show what you're doing? I mean, that's how I think, you do it for you. But otherwise, like, find these examples that matter to you, and you're gonna have to keep repeating it over and over and over again. And you know this better than anyone teaching entrepreneurship, painting that picture, right? And then bringing that picture to life. But yeah, just find those examples and then get ready to repeat yourself a lot.
I would definitely say the way I approach a lot of what I do in music is really from a researcher's mindset. So my advice would be really look at this as like a research project, right? You already have in your mind what you believe as your hypothesis. And then to piggyback off of what Emily said, go and find those stakeholders and then start to get information like how you would in a research project, whether it's through interviews, whether it's through focus groups, whether it's through surveys, and then put all of that qualitative and quantitative data together to then prove or disprove what your hypothesis is. That's how I normally go after any idea that I might have. And then maybe it's old school, but it is a process that works over the years. You have your hypothesis, and then you go and you find your data, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, to then prove or disprove what you believe your research was about.
Okay, we're gonna have to leave it there. Thank you all so much. Let's give a round of applause to our panel. Great discussion. We have a little bit of a break, I think about 10 to 15 minutes. If our panelists will stay up here, take your questions, mingle about, grab something to drink before the next session starts. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.